Hello, this is Donald Philip Veach raising a peculiar question called selling prayer book churchmanship, selling the Book of Common Prayer. Well, I might say right at the outset, the whole idea of salesmanship and selling is not a comfortable question. Even the title of the YouTube video, which I'll share with my friends in Twist House, comes with issues. I just don't like salesmen. I think of car salesmen, and I've had a few experiences there on the negative side. Yet, there's a whole field of study in business, which I know nothing about. So I'm the wrong guy to even be asking the question, selling prayer book churchmanship. It's called marketing, advertising, reaching a demographic audience. So sometimes in literature classes, you'll be told you want to identify the audience you're dealing with. Well, what is the audience of a prayer book? We discussed the other day, yesterday or two days ago, Cranmer had a whole nation about the size of North Carolina, England, size of Michigan, the same square mileage as England. He had 10,000 churches. And he was thinking that prayer book would convert the elect. And he knew that election was in his mind, including the office of baptism. He knew that only the elect would be truly regenerate. Now, he wasn't clear enough in the way he wrote that, and that created problems in Anglicanism. But salesmen, you got to have salesmen. My nephew is a salesman for prosthetic devices. He goes to hospitals and doctors' offices, and he's doing handsomely. He's got a handsome, huge, really huge, six-figure income for a young guy in his 20s. And then I bought several houses here in Jacksonville. I'd buy them, fix them up, rent them, because I like building things. But I had a realtor. He's a salesman. I just happened to call him here 3-4 weeks ago because my son, my third child, David, wants to get into the real estate market and buy houses. He wants to flip them, but I recommend buying them and then renting them. Build your capital that way. He likes working with his hands too. So you need salesmen, guys who think about the market. Of course, let's tie this in with the gospel that we're to go to the nations, and preach the kingdom of God and Jesus, teaching them whatsoever he's commanded us. So there's an outreach, outward looking. And again, I'm the last guy to approach about marketing with my little bias towards salesmen, but my recognition that they're good and necessary fields of endeavor and study. Missions, for example. Never had a missions course in seminary training, of all things. My cousin is also a salesman. He's vice president of sales. Forget the name of the company. They sell farming equipment. He's in China and the Middle East, all over the world. He makes a handsome income too as a salesman. So maybe this inquiry will provoke other thoughts, inquiries, suggestions, ideas, discussion. And part of the purpose of this is to dislodge any mental blocks we might have, I might have. What about prayer book churchmanship? Or when this applies to the confessions too, how do we market the confessions to a wider community? That's my first point. Issues with the very question of salesmanship, of prayer book churchmanship. Second point I'll raise is a North Carolina bishop. I think he was the 8th bishop of Eastern North Carolina. After World War II, he'd been a military army chaplain and then became a bishop. He wrote a lovely little book in the prayer book. And his essential idea was that it's biblical. It gives us the gospel. He even went on to say it's evangelical. It does its evangelistic work by lots of Bible. I'm right there with that bishop. He hit a home run with that. And I think that if we're going to market anything, it's a Bible book. If you love the Bible, in worship, you want a lot of Bible-saturated prayers. They used to sing the Psalms for 150 years after the English Reformation. It took a long time before hymnody took over. And we can go back to singing Psalms. Why not? Metrical tunes. Plenty of good soldiers out there. We're Bible people. So if we're going to talk about marketing, let's be branded as a Bible people. Let's not apologize. We're gospel-oriented people. Law and gospel. That's the old prayer book. So you want to talk to evangelicals, tell them you're a Bible person. Now, go to seminary, some of us have gone. You got professors who've never been pastors, teaching guys to be pastors. A PhD in ancient Near Eastern studies and Semitics. Well, it's wonderful. Necessary. But that guy is not thinking about Charlie and Susie up the street. Or a guy sits around doing church history all day long. Well, that's fine. Got to have church historians. I'm big into that. But what about Billy Bob, the farmer across the street? Yeah, and I live in a farm community, by the way. So you got to think about it. I think this idea of branding ourselves as Bible people, let us be known as that. If you like us, fine. If you don't like Bible people, fine. You know, you're free. It's America. But let's not be known by other things as Anglicans or Reformed Anglicans. Sorry for the stuttering. You got to put on Reformed because there's all these other whatevers, Tractarians, hand wavers, the three streamers. No, we're Reformed in theology. We should be known for that too if we're going to talk about marketing and branding. Interesting terms, isn't it, for churchmanship? Of course, I'm not a sociologist, so I don't know different groups, target demographics. We talked about that a little bit the other day, that Anglicanism has an appeal to the upper middle classes, the aristocratic and the blue bloods and the money people, and it does. Well, they got to have a church too. But we've got to be wider. We've got to be able to talk to the general as well as the private. Got to be able to go up to the bridge and talk to the skipper on the bridge, keeping it short, premeditated, precise, succinct, and to the point. He's running a ship. But you got to be able to go down into the bilges in the back, the stern of the ship, down in the engine room and talk to Charlie, who's working in the boiler room or the plant. He's hot and he's sweaty. I'm not so sure Episcopalianism has done so good at that. Not by intent. So the second point is this North Carolinian bishop said the Bible was an evangelistic tool, or the prayer book was an evangelistic tool. Indeed. Let's not be embarrassed about it. Sometimes Episcopalians don't like evangelism. Well, it's because there's such a perversion of it without teaching. Think of the 4 spiritual laws of Bill Bright. And shallowness. A lot of people became Christians. We were thankful for that. But let's us be Bible people, prayer book people. Let that be an evangelistic tool to call people in. And let's call them. Prayer book itself is evangelical. I don't care what your party label is. It's calling men from death to life, men and women, from the kingdom of Satan to the kingdom of light. Colossians 1:13. That's St. Paul. It's Jesus. Go preach the kingdom. Well, I like that second North Carolinian bishop had it right. Now, third, how do we market this? Again, I hate the question marketing. It's just, I have never had a marketing course. I'm not a business student. I know nothing about business. Glad for businessmen. Glad for Wharton School of Business, products, commerce, industry, legitimate profit, benefiting a workforce, not Marxists. But how do we market this? You see my tension with the question. How do we market this to evangelicals? Say that broad entity out there in America, which is probably the biggest. Let's face it, the Episcopal Church gets 722,000 in attendance every Sunday morning. Or Anglican Church North America claims 100,000 members. It's a marginal little group. Now, it's different in England because they have a history of the Church of England, or Australia even, where Anglicanism is better, or even in Canada. Anglicanism is a well-known entity, English product. But in America, let's face the music here. It's not an influential group. The liberals have really injured themselves. They become social justice warriors. That's the seminary stuff. None of their seminaries require Greek and Hebrew for their men. Well, how do you market a prayer book to the evangelical crowd? Well, I think it's simple. Bible. We're Bible people. Like the Bible? Use Tom Cranmer's prayer book. Some things in the prayer book we need to change, I agree. Priest, minister, need to adjust the baptismal office, make sure we're much more sensitive, like the Westminster Divines were, to election. I think also there's been a marketing thing with Westminster Seminary. They have an Anglican track. Unfortunately, they send them over to Reformed Episcopal to get their Anglican training, which who knows what should get over there. Reformed Theological Seminary also has an Anglican track. There are some good men running that. And Knox Theological Seminary in Fort Lauderdale has a Doctor of Ministry program for Anglicans. But again, it's the branding matter. We're known for our stately hymns, thankfully. Old Episcopalians love their hymns. They're very, very particular. And their music, we're branded for that. And that could be off-putting. Say you got a young guy, young couple. They've grown up on hard metal rock music. And I walk in Episcopal service with the prayer book and grand stately hymns. That's a cultural adjustment. I don't think we need to. Some think you do. You need to bring in the band. In fact, I think even my own rector is starting to think that way. The minute that happens, I'm gone. My poor wife has to deal with that. The old people aren't going to go for the band, so I don't know how you market this to evangelicals other than say we're a Bible-committed people. That was Cranmer. There is no question he was a sola scriptura man in a big way and early. The question is, did he have exposure to Erasmus in 1516? That's an open question. Certainly in the 1520s, he was a Bible man. He was the examiner of ordinands to the ministry in the 1520s. His doctorate, I forget now, 15. I was 37 years old, so whatever. It was in the 1520s. Became a university lecturer and have a little brain lapse there. And these ordinands would come up and he'd answer the questions for theology from the schoolmen. But they didn't know any Bible. Sorry, boys. Back to the study. He offended a lot of men who then had to go back and study the Bible and come back before they'd be ordained. But he was clearly tracking in the sola scriptura direction very early. Maybe one of his earliest developments was the role of the Bible. And Ralph Maurice, his secretary, tells us that he saw the issues afloat on the continent, Luther and the like. And he realized that these issues went to the very fundamentals, not the tangential things of the faith. And he said he needed to study the Bible, so he himself took some years off to just study the Bible. He's a Bible man. We should be known as Bible men. Princeton, Old Princeton, and then New Princeton with J. Gresham Machen was founding philosophy is that we should be specialists in the Bible. We should know it so well to apply to everything. Get it right. So I think that's the marketing thing. Let's not be embarrassed about it. Now, the ACNA, I've never heard them talk about inerrancy, fallibility, divine authority of scriptures. So, and they're picking up these disaffected evangelicals, which I can understand. You've been strumming and drumming and nothing in the head. You see an Anglican service and biblicality, and wow, can understand the attraction. But they're bringing some other stuff with them. This is going on, I think, up at the church in Wheaton. Young college students finding once and for all something deeper. There's also the catechist up there, a lady, PhD in French, said some awful things at the First Anglican Conference on Theology in Birmingham. She gets up and says, Reformed people, they read, mark, and learn, but don't digest. We Anglicans, we read, mark, learn, and digest. I mean, I nearly fell out of the pew. It went unchallenged, too. It was hubris through the whole lecture. Come on, you're going to brand us as the only people who digest theology? She actually said it in a conference full of maybe 1,000 callers there. We're the only ones who digest theology. Oh, I was sitting over in the southern transept, choking in the pew. Nobody challenged it. Hubris. Rather than branding us as this superior entity, let's be branded as a people who are serious about the Bible. And we went through the prayer book the other day, and it's the Bible. So I don't know how to brand it. ACNA guys, they've got so much diversity with their three streamers. You got the crazy guys. I saw a bishop jumping around in a service up in California. It was awful. He had the music going. He jumping around. That's not prayer book. Doesn't fit. It's not the same ethos. Not the same animal. But they want to create this new three-stream stuff so they can market it to charismatics. And then they got the Tractarian termites, Anglo-papalists without the Pope, saying crazy stuff. They want to appeal to them to be this some kind of broad whatever. And as a result, they're never going to be really close with the PCAs or OPCs. Those leaders. So the third thing here is, how do we market this to evangelicals? The broad revival people. Going back to the second point with the bishop from Eastern North Carolina. Well, how do we market prayer book among liberal Episcopalians? Well, they've already got a prayer book that got 1979. There was a little revolt over that new prayer book. I don't know what to say to that crowd. I'm still in that denomination. I've been there for 20 years. My wife and I, before that, with the Reformed Episcopalians in the military. I just don't want to say I've thought of getting reordained with them, or not reordained, but putting my credentials there, but they might want to reordain me. I'm not going to tolerate that. Bob Duncan does that. The PCA guys coming into the ACNA, he regularizes them because their ordination is inadequate. Talking about who, but they didn't do that in English Reformation. That's Bob Duncan. And the RECs fell for that. But did they reordain Bishop Leonard Riches? I don't know. And Episcopalians, the liberals, they've never liked evangelism. That's not been true historically. There were evangelicals, I think of Bishop Charles Petit McIlvaine. Things grew under him, and other evangelicals too in the history of the Church of England. A friend of mine, Joe Mailer, says that it was the evangelical Episcopalians that saved the Episcopal Church from going defunct as they got out to the people. And I don't know if Tractarianism has really ever had a solid, wide acceptance. That would be a good historical study. So I don't know what to say about talking to liberal Episcopalians. They've got a whole boatload of other problems. What they're branded for these days is what? Ordaining gay people. That's what they're branded for. Unfortunately, I've been able to address that a couple of times. Once at a church we were at, basically shut down the whole discussion because they were kind of getting out of control. It was kind of offensive. So I stood up, blah, 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 blah. That was it. It shut the discussion down. I was glad I was there. And people took it, and I love the people, etc. I still take some hits for why I'm still in the Episcopal Church. Where we're at now, they actually put on some decent Bible studies for Sunday school. Taught Romans a couple of years ago. The whole 9 yards. Justification, sanctification, perseverance of the saints, had a few objections on election, but dealt with it. Man, they were receptive. One of the old Presbyterians was surprised to hear an Episcopalian talking about election. But as a denomination, the structure's badly corrupted. So I don't know what to say to this. Like I said, I'm not the guy, I'm not the outreach guy, the marketer. I do like in fact, I love the Cathedral of the Advent in Birmingham. Professor Gerald Brago's there, and I love what they do. They're Episcopalians, TEC. And they use Rite 1, which is almost exact copy of Thomas Cranmer's Book of Common Prayer. And they do morning prayer at the early service, and then they do Holy Communion at the second service. The next week, they invert it. Holy Communion at early, morning prayer. And then the next week, they invert it. So in any given month, the congregation is getting a couple of morning prayer services and a couple of Holy Communion services, the old ones. That's a cathedral tradition church. They have the cathedral choir. Be the place where I'd go if I was in Birmingham. No question about it. Old school. And a tremendous witness. And the bishop puts up with it, allows it. A wise man. Same with St. John's in Savannah, although they have some of the Tractarian pieties, which I can abide, but they talk more about the prayer book and Richard Hooker than they do the Bible, in my estimation. They have a branding issue there. That's the church where General William Tecumseh Sherman, Uncle Billy, they called him, Civil War, took Savannah. And at Christmas, 1864, he had his army chaplain conduct Christmas service in that church. So I don't know what to say in terms of marketing to liberal Episcopalians. They've got the 1979 lectionary, which is a disaster. Wrong direction. Axed out portions of the Bible, portions of Romans, and they go through the Bible once every 3 years compared to Cranmer's more vigorous program. The old timers like the music, of course, and they've all gotten adjusted to the 79 book now. And there's been a move in a direction away from repentance and atonement issues. 1940 Episcopal Hymn Book had that. 1982, the shift was underway. Same for the shift from 28 Prayer Book to the 79 Prayer Book. Or you go to England, go to the cathedrals. Oh my goodness. I spent 3 weeks over there with my wife. We went to 21 cathedrals. We did all the services, evening song every night. But they were cutting off the front end of the service. The sentences, the exhortation to worship, the confession of sin, and the declaration. They just jumped into a few suffrages and then the reading, and then they even chopped off out a few of the collects at the end. And I knew the 1662 prayer book, and going around England, pay all this money, go over there and hotels and food, and doing some preliminary research. Everywhere I went, we were with 120 American Anglican musicians on this tour. So we were getting lectures during the day as well as the divine services and organ recitals. So I had plenty of opportunity to talk to lots of people. And nobody had the answer to the question, why are you hacking off the front end of the service? I don't know. Finally got to Exeter Cathedral. Went to morning prayer. The bishop was there. I talked to the precentor, man responsible for liturgies, wonderful man. Asked him the same question because that was a genuine, honest, why are they cutting this off? Cutting the heart off the beginning of the service, away from repentance and atonement. I had my suspicions. I didn't know. So the precentor said, it's a good question. Let me take you over and we'll talk to the bishop. Off we went off some little hallway off the southern transept into this and that and the other. We're going through these old rooms, and finally we're in the bishop's vesting area, and he presents the question. He gave me two answers. He said, well, he had been the dean at King's College at Cambridge for a while before that, an academic. And he said, well, 20th century theology does not like sin and repentance. So there's been a shift away from that in the Church of England. Now, we're talking about marketing the prayer book Bible in a liberalized context. And that made sense. Okay, so he's admitting the preeminence and dominance of liberalized theology that doesn't take original sin for atonement like the old divines did. Then he said, we're also trying to get away from Cranmer's double predestinarianism, which blew me out of the water. I don't see why. You're probably talking about Augustine's view of sin, double predestination. It was probably part of what was going on. We had a lovely 30, 40-minute chat, but that kind of nailed it down. I don't want to deal with sin. I know my friend Hudson Barton constantly raises the issue that at ACNA, consecrations of bishops, there's no confession of sin. I can't speak to that. Never seen an ACNA bishop consecrated. I've seen some Episcopal bishops consecrated. But again, marketing, liberal Episcopalians, I think we just tell them we're Bible people. In the old school Athanasian, Ignatian, Pauline, apostolic sense of it. We go back to Thomas Cranmer's Confutation of Written Verities and see what the church believed in Sola Scriptura. That's what we are. We're old Princeton. So this is the fourth point about how do you market it to liberal Episcopalians? We're Bible people. You tell them that. A fifth thing in terms of marketing and branding would be conferences. I'm thinking of the Philadelphia Conference on Reformed Theology in 1974 when Jim Boyce started. Reformed theology was about defunct. That thing was ready to die. The liberals and the Bardians had taken over, and bye-bye classic Reformed theology. And he started with some scholars, started as a way to encourage one another. I mean, Reformed theology was, other than Westminster Seminary, there was no Reformed Theological Seminary, just some little beginning down in Jacksonville. PCA was 1 year old, a little tiny entity. Nobody knew what it was. A few people on the side. So Jim started PCRTs, and he did it in Pittsburgh, Chicago, Atlanta, Philadelphia. He invited in the top scholars, have a weekend conference. I remember going to the first one, and oh my word, it was glorious. 1974. John Gerstner was there. He lectured on Tulip. And then this young guy with hair going everywhere was R.C. Sproul. Didn't know him then. Jim Boyce was just coming onto the scene, too. Brand new. Christianity Today was covering it. But what it did it was a renaissance of Reformed theology that ultimately, it kept going on. I think it's a bit of a shadow of itself since Jim died in 2000. Lost a great statesman and commanding general, Jim gone. Ligonier carried on, and look at what Ligonier's done for the popularization of Reformed theology. A tremendous force in America and around the world. So conferences may be a way to brand, advance. It's okay to talk about advance. We're talking about advancing the Bible in an age of illiteracy. And a form of worship that's Bible-driven. Well, conferences may be the way to go. Now, I guess there's some Anglican conferences out there. They used to do Mere Christianity, I think, or Mere Anglicanism in Charleston. I don't know, that seems to have disappeared. The Prayer Book Society in Savannah every year. I think we may do one in Canterbury next year or the year after. But that's got about 40, 50 callers at it. High-end academics. But it's not a popular conference. Don't put any of it on any public marketways or radio. So I go and I enjoy the scholars. I have a good time every year. And I understand the Brits have a Prayer Book Society too. Canadians, people trying to keep the old Book of Common Prayer. But we're on this fifth point of conferences. There was another conference, the first conference on Anglican theology at Beeson Divinity School in Birmingham, Alabama. I talked about that in an earlier one. One of the great joys of that was to listen to Dr. Gerald Bray. That was beautiful. Maybe, 500,000 callers in there. And the second one was on the Judaistic or Judaizing or first century Judaism, the roots of Christianity. Well, that's nice in a New Testament scholarship guild for those men, but didn't really have to do with Anglicanism. So I didn't go to that one. That was more of a matter of New Testament scholarship than Anglican conference. Again, appealing to scholars, but what about Charlie and Susie across the road? Are they talking and asking the question about how do we advance the gospel? I don't know. And it's a bit of a hodgepodge, too. I had that Anglo-Tractarian SSC churchman, Bishop Chandler Jones, which was an embarrassment. I talked about that a little while ago. Or even at that conference, this French professor of French, PhD in French, getting up and saying the Reformed don't digest theology. They only read, mark, and learn. We Anglicans, we read, mark, learn, and digest. She went on about how they have better feelings and emotions. wants to hear, I'm better than thou? I'm more Anglican than thou. Anglicans are more this, that, and the other than the Reformed. I'll say in our branding, let's make sure we walk humbly. Every day, ask God for that. Ask God to clean up the mind and heart on pride. Marketing through conferences, yeah. It worked with Jim Boyce, and he was a great guy. Oh, man. Sixth, how do we market with the Pentecostals? Same way, Bible. We love the Bible. I heard T.D. Jakes and Joel Osteen on YouTube this morning being interviewed by an NBC guy, MSNBC guy, asking how they're going to deal with the lesbian gay issue in the church. And both of them said they'll have a place. Without any nuance or discussion. Yeah, Pentecostal's going to fall in time. There may be some further church splits on it, like the Methodists, but they're going to fall because they're not Bible-driven. So marketing, branding, advertising, and I don't like this marketing, branding stuff. I'm not a salesman. I don't think. Well, I've had many men come to Christ to the military. My idea being just teach. God will do the calling. And I tell sailors that. You're never going to strong arm by this Calvinist. I'll present the gospel and what it requires. And I had more guys come back. I remember some guys come one by one, come to my office and say, Chaplain, I'm so glad you did that. You never pressured me. I've now become a Christian. They'd tell me that like a few months later. Okay, wonderful. Want to be baptized? That's available here too. Anyways, marketing to Pentecostals, we must really tell them we're a Bible people, and we have to have that ourselves. We have to have the courage of telling them that. Cessationism and tongues is not tongues, it's Babel. Well, what about marketing and academic centers? Well, I think that's smart. I think of Reformed University Fellowship with the Presbyterians. You set yourself up around university centers, establish places of the gospel. Wheaton, good place to go. I think of Hillsdale, Michigan. They got a Acme church there, and the musician with a doctorate in music. So you get great music. You get the old prayer book. And it attracts young students. Or I mentioned already Knox Seminary with the D-Min program and WTS, and Reformed with Anglican tracts. That's good stuff. I was up at Westminster a few years back, and after classes in between, I went down to the student center. This was late in the afternoon. Many of the students had left the campus already. I was still hanging around. Went down there. And there was a group of Nigerians, maybe about 25 of them. And they all started, everybody was talking at once. I caught my ear. I wondered what in the world. It wasn't conversational. It was all 20, 25 of them talking at once. So after they finished and became more sociable, I ambled over and started talking to them. And they were all Nigerian Anglicans at Westminster Seminary. I said, what was all that about? Well, they have a moment in their prayer service where they all pray at the same time. It's just unique. Not one in sequence after another, but they all just pray. I understand the Koreans, some Korean Presbyterians do the same thing. So I had a great chat with some of them. I said, well, what are you doing here at the Presbyterian Seminary? I get any prayer book churchmanship. I said, we know. We come here for the theology. We'll keep our prayer book. And I thought that was a good answer. They're very charitable guys and trying to do scholarship and theology, yet keeping their prayer book. So I think academic centers is a way to market conferences, as we already mentioned it. An eighth venue would be books. I don't have any book. I got my own prayer book published for private reasons. But think of Jim Packer, or the work of Dr. Gerald Bray. Just some really stellar things there. Or the work of Church Society, online things that are available. I think what a Reformed brother did, Reverend Danny Hyde, he wrote a book, Welcome to the Reformed Church. And the idea of the book was, you're coming in from the outside, you don't know anything about Reformed theology. What are you going to get? What should you expect? What should you get used to? It's a very welcoming book. And we should have that. Some kid raised on rock music walking into an Episcopal church with Bach prelude and stately hymns and good orderly service. It takes a lot to come from that into a prayer book church and learn about it. I think another venue, while I'm going to take a tangent here, is that we probably do need a better job in the Sunday school curriculum. I think the last 20 years of churchmanship in the Episcopal Church, there was nothing on the prayer book in Sunday school, to my knowledge, and I went. Or they should have graded things. Here's something for the young kids. Here's something for the high school. Here, the old timers, or a refresher course. I know they've never done that out where I'm at. We've been at the last 4 or 5 years. Same would be with confession. And this gets into Sunday school curriculum. You should be addressing biblical illiteracy head on. So I don't have any answers. I told you I'm not a good marketer or salesman, but maybe this will provoke some thinking for us. The ninth thing I would say in terms of marketing and sales would be we ourselves need to be Bible people and prayer book people. I think of what Hudson Barton does every night is tremendous. There's some real leadership there. Every night, 24/7, Bible, prayer book, morning and evening. We need to be that. Sharon and I have done that for years. It's a little different now. She gets up, gone in the morning, and I do my own. And at night, she does Grandma Voss stuff and prayer with the grandkids, 2 of them. So we have a little different schedule. The kids grew up on it. We need to have it in our own home, in our own lives before we're going to talk. And just naturally, not forced, but we're prayer book people. We're Reformed Anglicans or Reformed Prayer Bookmen, churchmen. May not accept episcopacy as ancient and desirable. I've come to the view that it's ancient and not so desirable, frankly, for what I've seen, but I don't make a big deal of that. So I think the ninth venue for marketing is that this should be branded as a prayer book people, Reformed prayer book people. A tenth issue in terms of marketing, and this is where my concern is with, say, this little splinter group called ACNA. It is a splinter group, 100,000. No, they're uninfluential. They got a school in Ambridge, I guess, kind of charismatic. I've never heard them address inerrancy or infallibility. It's like a non-issue. Guess what? That's a big deal. Your doctrine of Scripture is huge. I recommend Professor Robert Raymond's Systematic Theology for any Anglican who regrettably was trained in an Episcopal school. Need to address this. We need to address biblical illiteracy and brand ourselves as that. And I remember Bob Duncan. Never ever heard justification by faith alone. I've heard it in some little conferences with Dr. Ashley Null. He does some gang around some, and Reformation Anglicanism, which is a popularizing book. But in terms of a branding of the denomination, it never mentioned justification by faith alone, the hinge of the Reformation, said John Calvin. Talks about transformation of the gospel, transformational power. We're there. We got to deepen things here. Effectual calling, union with Christ, justification by faith alone, the forensic decree of acquittal, sanctification, glorification, perseverance of the saints, joy. It's all in a larger complex. It never gets exposited. This goes back to seminary training. Some of these guys were trained in Episcopal schools. So in terms of branding, I think there's got to be some theological branding, better branding. And 11th thing, theological students, like TNARs, brand new, school 10 years old, and the students are becoming known by the product. The product is selling the school. They're well-trained men. And so that should be the same for anybody who's Anglican, who's just well-trained. That's part of our DNA. We're not embarrassed by that. Or those Nigerians at Westminster. So the bottom line here, I don't know how to answer this preliminary question, a question I don't like, but a question we need to raise. First, we need ourselves, this is a 12th and last point, we ourselves, family and self. And it's okay to have, in fact, it's good to have a prayer book in your home every day, morning and evening with family. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst. That's a promise, as Bishop Curry's tell us all the time as students. We have 2 or 3 of us gathered together. We're in a majority. And he might say that 3 or 4 of us. And he'd just get a little smirk on his face, a little smile. It's stuck. So in the home, God's with us. Us and our kids, the covenant of grace, that's the first institution of learning. It's the first seminary. And then in this bottom line, I think the schools are an important venue. Third, conferences are important. Partnerships. Also literature, we've mentioned that, and good online stuff and hard copy books. So the question here is branding. What is the TEC known for today? Gay issues, liberalism, social justice stuff. I heard some stuff at the National Cathedral here a year ago. That's another story. Or ACNA, what are they branded by? Or what are Reformed Anglicans branded by? How do we bridge this gap between being learned, educated, and scholarly for some and Charlie across the street? I'd be able to talk to them. How do we, some cultural issues that are going on. This isn't just true for Anglicans, it's true for Reformed people in general too. So I've got a discussion. Hopefully it'll provoke some better thinking, because I'm not the best man on missions and outreach, evangelism. Nobody's talking about evangelism at Reformed Episcopal Seminary. What kind of Book of Acts is important? But anyways, you got thoughts? Add them at the bottom. I'm open to learn. I got much more to learn, indeed. But it's just making an effort. And I would say, big picture, let's be branded as Bible people. Let's be that. Let us be known as that. Come meet me as a neighbor. Yeah, I'm a Bible person, prayer book man. So, listen, that's what I got. I wanted to raise a question. How do we sell this? Well, I don't know. How is the question? I don't like the question, but anyways, God bless. Godspeed. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.